KWFM, South Tucson.
The views of this program are not necessarily those of KWFM, its management, or its sponsors. The host is solely responsible for the content.
Welcome, everybody, inside the studios of KWFM 1330 The Star. This is the Jake Feinberg program, and in an effort to dissect race, sociology, values, and leadership in a retrospective going back 40 years, I do this through interviews with my heroes in music. And my guest today is just one of those cats, a guy who came, his sound evolved and was described in many ways as a carryover from the Bird, Charlie Parker. But make no mistake, my guest's career, and as modest as he is, spans maybe over half a century, working with the likes of Barry Harris and Charles Mingus and Jimmy Raney and Pat Martino and Don Patterson and Billy James and titans and people that were larger than life, bigger than maybe even God themselves. He himself is one of those characters. He continues to his prodigious career making albums, making music, collaborating, teaching, and just being an overall decent human being. Lord knows we need it during these times. Charles McPherson, welcome to the Jake Feinberg Show.
Okay, hey, thank you, and thank you for having me.
Charles, I wanted to ask you a question.
Yes.
Do you feel as a society that we are less evolved than we were, say, when you were growing up and first joining Mingus into the 50s and 60s?
Well, let's see. It's interesting because it's a kind of a complicated answer. I don't think that we are more evolved artistically or any other way other than maybe technically, I would say. So in terms of gadgets or just the technology available or understood these days, one could say more evolved if one could actually say that. But in terms of aesthetics or art itself, whether it be music or any of the other arts, I wouldn't say that we are more evolved. And I know more about music than the other arts, because that's what I do.
Sure.
I don't think we're more evolved at all that way. In fact, I would say maybe it might be a slight dumbing down that has happened, and I'll go out on a limb and actually say that.
Can you extrapolate on that?
I will. To try to not sound so expansive about it, I would say that there are still people in the arts, and let's say in music, that have not fallen prey to dummying down, but only because that they might be special people and very talented people, and some sort of way have kept a certain level of musicianship or craftsmanship, and also has kept a certain level of execution and technique and all the things, and say inspiration as well. But there, without a doubt, has become a certain mind or a certain quality of mind, actually, that knows to be successful, one doesn't necessarily have to be wonderful at the craft or artistically at all. There's a way to like if you use the tools of marketing hype, just the media, there's a way to let's say exploit a particular person or artist or whatever, and if everything is, of all of the what would you say, the trappings around this person is well executed and well thought out, that you can actually have this person be a known commodity, be thought of as wonderful, and really the craft, and since we're talking about music, the craft of music doesn't necessarily have to be a high order. It can just be say okay, and it's okay. Where that same situation years and years and years ago wouldn't play. So even if I go back to the 40s and look at popular music in the 40s or 30s, even the people who were successful were usually pretty doggone good musicians,
right?
And could do what they did pretty well. There was you had to have a certain level, or rise to a certain level of proficiency to even get record dates, to get the kind of exposure that people got. Even in the world of pop music, if you go back, say, to Frank Sinatra, for instance, in the 40s, Frank Sinatra could sing, There are people who were known because of the craft of what they're doing and how well they did it, as opposed to exploiting any kind of sexuality in an overt way, or this is the only thing we are pushing. You really did have to sing. What kind of clothes you had on could help with maybe getting someone to get across. But it wasn't the main event. It was the voice. So with that in mind, yeah, I would venture to say that there's been some dumbing down to the extent, because you don't need to have that same high level of proficiency in order to be successful and make money. And the minute that the powers that be, the middle people between the public and the artist, the minute that they find out that one can do that, and a lot of people can become wealthy because of it, then therein lies the dumbing down aspect that can come about.
I was talking yesterday to the A&R man and producer Blue Thumb Tommy LaPuma, and he talked about this idea of not painting with a broad brush, because there's still obviously cats that are keeping it real, but this idea of back in the 40s and 50s, what you were talking about, you wouldn't even be considered for a record date unless you, not just proficiency, but you had mastered different idioms, different genres. You had to master this stuff. And it seems now in our society, because of this digital sort of the quickening of the pace of life, the pace of how things get done, everyone thinks they're behind the curve. So you have a lot of artists now coming out in music through the business practices that really are not proficient in all idioms. I mean, it's very much like they're almost blank slates. Yeah. When you talk about some of the great painters, I agree with you. I'm more focused on music than other forms of art. Yeah. But when you look back at modernist painters, they were looking at their forefathers to develop. For what I'm trying to say, there was a mastering before implementation, and that seems to have gone awry.
Yeah, I agree. Hey, listen, Jake, just for I think if you could be just a hair louder, if that's possible.
Yeah, absolutely.
I have to strain just a bit to hear.
I don't want to do no. I mean, I don't want to be too hot for you, though. Let me know.
Okay, all right.
Has technology, like you said, we've evolved from a digital point of view. There's no doubt. I mean, from a technical point of view, we've evolved. But has the evolution of inanimate objects hurt our ability to interact in human qualities?
Well, yeah. See, and that's a double-edged sword, because technology can be helpful. Of course, we know that in so many ways. But then there's some kind of the only way to win with that is to be aware that the human being and everything about what that means in terms of also how we communicate with each other, that you can never lose sight of what that is and the importance of things like that. So you have to be careful of letting technology destroyed that in a way. And then there's always there's the dichotomy there. There's it can happen. So, but if a society is smart, they will relegate to technology maybe the donkey work, or to just coin a phrase.
Mm-hmm.
But when it comes to you have to be careful when it starts to threaten a certain kind of communication between human beings, an organic kind of communication. That's important. Otherwise, you might as well be a robot. So you have to know that, and so therein lies that's the art of knowing how to use the technology and still maintain your humanity. That becomes the test. Otherwise, you can just be it's like looking at Star Trek and saying, well, 1,000 years from today, you have a bunch of robot people that are just a member of some collective.
Well, I mean,
you know what I mean.
I don't want to go.
So,
no,
yeah.
I mean, it's. I don't want to go too deep into sociology, but it's like, I come from a mixed family, Jewish and Catholic, and we spent a lot of time when I was growing up, schmoozing and interacting with family and people. Mm-hmm. And there are a lot of families out there who are not as expressive. They don't talk as much. They don't share as much. And now with technology, like you're talking about droids, mm-hmm. I have two daughters, mm-hmm. and collectively I see two paths emerging with youth of the new generations. I see generations of my kids. I see open-minded kids that are from multi-ethnic families, kids that are exposed to a lot of different things because they come from certain backgrounds. And then there's other kids who come from less expressive families, maybe less educated families, and because of the advent of this amount of technology and the ability for it to be accessible by even people that are considered at the poverty level, that you're creating people that are not thinking analytically; they're thinking linearly, in a very linear fashion. Yeah. And from a musical point of view, that is stunted. Yeah. Stunted. I mean, when you were down the street from Barry Harris, growing up in Detroit, you guys weren't on your iPhones sending emails. I mean, you were walking outside, you were mixing it up, and then ultimately getting down to business of making music and being more yourself. You knew who you guys were, and that's, so I think that, but I just, it's one of those things where, from a public policy standpoint, while the show is inherently based on collaborations musically, I'm beginning to hear people talk about our public policy when it comes to healthcare and women's rights, and the fact that I hear independent voices, not people from either extreme, just regular independent people saying, we're moving backward. These policies are not progressive; they're regressive. And I'm trying to think from a sociological point of view: why are people so afraid unless they think that we really are doomed? I mean, that's the only way I can say it.
Well, you got to realize. I mean, because now you are getting into sociology, and also, which is all part. I mean, everything is everything. I mean, all of that everything else informs everything else. So every part. So art. I mean, there's a way. Everything is it's a puzzle. But you got to realize that the people, most people, and certainly the level of consciousness of this planet, of Earth, of people, people are still in a tribal. Still have tribal. They're still being motivated by tribal, or whatever you want to call it, primordial. That whole thing. They still, people, and then you can say it's very human, but it's still them. It's about them and us in every kind of way possible.
Right.
Okay, so here's the interesting thing. You got all the gadgetry. You got the digital this, blah, blah, blah. You got people going to the moon, doing this, or traveling at, finding out the speed of light and finding out the super strings theory. You got all this stuff. But yet and still, emotionally and on a human level, besides the gadgetry, the evolution of the human consciousness on this planet is not a hell of a lot different than it was 5,000 years ago. at the drop of a hat,
Mm-hmm.
any one of us, the human beings, are very willing to take someone's life based on nothing more noble or less noble than somebody did it 5,000 years ago. The kind of people that were considered enlightened, beautiful people were in the minority 5,000 years ago, as they are now.
Mm.
It's always been people, 2%, 1%, that knew going to the games in Rome and watching people get torn to pieces by wild animals was wrong. There were people back then who knew it and who didn't go to the games, but most people did. As now, there's just a small percentage of people, no matter who they are, what race, what gender, they know because they're going by a heavenly court, by a golden rule, that this is not right because, but for the grace of God, there go me, or I wouldn't want this to happen to me, so therefore I won't run it on somebody else.
Right.
Now, that a number of people are percentages, 1 or 2%, of whoever they are. I don't care if they're black, white, Chinese, Asian, this, that, green, yellow, man, female, kid, whatever. So the point is that most people are, unfortunately, at the same level where I don't care what their technology is. All it takes is one thing to go wrong, a blackout, a shortage here, and it's not long where people are actually acting like animals. And the few people that won't, don't, will not, or really, it takes a hell of a lot for them to go that way, are that same little small percentage that I'm talking about. So that's just the way it is. Now, when it comes to art and all this kind of stuff, it doesn't change. If people, look, if people, it's not like the DNA is not as good as it was. You know, it's just that the thrust of being materially, whatever it will make people. Let me see, I'm sort of losing my thought, but
no, I know what. Listen, I want to be very clear. I think
it is. It's like the path of least resistance. It's the lowest chakra. Whatever can make money the fastest for the most amount of people.
Just do it.
It's usually about 2 inches below the navel, and then that gets everybody. That gets a lot of people, and then there you are, you're successful. A lot of people can be wealthy, and that's great.
Mm-hmm.
However, a human being is more than just 2 inches below the navel. There's a lot to people, and you got all this other stuff above the navel. So human beings are, and me one of them, I don't mean to say I know something that people don't, other people don't, is that obviously we are in a state of becoming, and maybe there's such a thing as ascension or evolution of consciousness to a higher degree, and we all are trying to find our way that way, and we're still in kindergarten, basically.
I would just ask you, based on your experience, and then we can put a button on this. Did you during the formative period of civil rights, do you recall the idea of 2 steps back, 3 steps forward? Was there a period, before periods of progress in your lifetime, did you have to go back before you exploded? Once you went forward, you really went forward, or was it more based on the idea of people were more secure with themselves? They knew because they had been through life experience. There was more leadership, and therefore, some of these sort of scare tactics and this tribalism that you speak of it just didn't stick.
Well, yeah, and you got the element of people just being tired of being. In terms of the '60s and before the whole civil rights thing, if you could use, say, like a person like Rosa Parks as an example, it's not like she's thinking of too much of anything other than, like, I don't feel like, I'm tired. I'm not, get up and go to the back of the bus for what?
Right, exactly.
For somebody 21, 18 years old, and because their skin color is different, and here I am, this, older woman and blah blah blah. Based on what, So it a lot of stuff is just like, you know what, I'm sick of this. I'm not going to do it, and then things. There's a domino effect, and it's almost like it's time. There's just time for certain things to happen. Now, that right there, just that whole thing it's when people basically start seeing people as it's the whole thing of the separation thing. It's them and the whole them and us. Once, if ever, the human beings are not motivated by that, then maybe the real quest and the real thing will actually start to happen, which is basically how it's just being able to live and let live. Just live, don't, and just, it's the real meaning of civilization. People think civilization means because you got toilets that flush. The real meaning of that is to be able to live your life, do what you want to do, and have it not impact somebody else as much as possible. And if it does, then let's see how we can work this out, or whatever. But God bless you and God bless me. That's really what it. Now that's the real meaning of that. Now, until people start seeing them and us in the look at other people as themselves, that'll never happen. And the minute you got people that look differently, like race, black, white, red, yellow, blue, green, whatever, there's just a more visual. Basically, it's it's not even really the truth, because see, if you made everybody the same, all white, all black, all brown, make everybody the same religion, they all believe in Jesus, they all believe in Moses or Jehovah or Buddha, you make them all everything, make them all the same height, the same weight, and whatever you want to do, some kind of way, humans will find a way to have a mechanism in place to separate them and us. So,
Charles, I just want to, this is, again, we're talking to a musician who we've just peeled off 24 minutes of sociology. Charles, we're going to take a short break and go to the bottom of the hour news. Okay. And when we come back, we're going to go through your career, okay?
Okay, fine.
This is the Jake Feinberg Show on KWFM 1330, The Star.
This is the Jake Feinberg Show. We'll be right back.
Folks, this is Jake Feinberg. One of the first things I wanted to do when I moved to Tucson was find authentic Chinese cuisine. After a tip from the Chinese Student Association, I headed over to Badar Chinese Restaurant. Well, it's been 7 years, and I have never looked back. Located at 7321 East Broadway Boulevard, Badar has been a family-run operation since 1992. The award-winning chef produces succulent dishes from sizzling ginger chicken to salt and pepper shrimp. The thing that separates Badar from the rest is that the chef procures ancient oriental dishes with the exotic island flair of Taiwan. Most importantly, there are no gimmicks or razzle-dazzle at Badar. You won't find any flat-screen TVs or karaoke machines. Badar is a place to go enjoy good food and spend time with your family. It exudes peace and tranquility after a long week of work. So come down and check out Badar Chinese Restaurant. Hong Hao Chu. It's that good. folks, this is Jake Feinberg. When it came time to decide where to buy my daughter a piano last year, the choice was easy. We got it at Hackenberg & Sons Piano Company. Located at 4333 East Broadway Boulevard, Hackenberg & Sons is Tucson's longest-running family-owned piano business. Run by three brothers and a son, they pride themselves on superior instruments and customer satisfaction. It's why they've been around so long. And it's why their pianos are used at the University of Arizona, Pima Community College, and many other prestigious institutions. So whether it's for your child, business, or yourself, when you buy a piano, make sure you go to Hackenberg & Sons. It'll be the beginning of a long-lasting partnership. For more information, visit them at hackenbergpiano.com. In this day and age, people have a lot to protect. You want to know that when you're insuring valuable goods, you have an agent you can trust. Craig Pretzinger is that agent. For auto, home, and life insurance, the Pretzinger Agency is Tucson's most honest and flexible insurance company. Have off-road vehicles or motorhomes? Pretzinger can cover that as well. Pretzinger Agency at 299-5810, located across the street from Sullivan's Steakhouse on the southwest corner of River and Campbell. Trust, compassion, and service. The whole package at Pretzinger Agency. Call 299-5810 or text QUOTE to 602-459-5533 to receive a no-obligation quote. If you're not part of the solution, you're part of the problem. Be a part of a new coalition with Jake Feinberg. The second half of my show starts right now. No Time to Waste with Charles McPherson. Charles, welcome back.
Are you there?
I'm here, buddy.
Yeah. Okay, yeah, I just heard, I don't know what that was.
Don't worry about it. Listen, I wanted to ask you, you had a really good quote from an interview you did with a classic guy, Mel Martin, I was reading, about retaining music through the ears. And this was sort of Mingus's philosophy in the idea, he'd write charts, but they were basically chicken scratch. And the idea that you were quoted as saying, oftentimes the stuff that I really do retain is through the ears. And I was hoping you could talk about how you use your other senses in music, like your ears, to retain something in a society that is very visual now.
Well, yeah, because music is. I mean, a lot of everything we do is. All the senses are in play, but certainly the ears are in playing music, and most definitely in terms of improvising. So the ear is one of the most important senses because the discriminative ear or discriminative hearing is what's by way of the ear-brain connection. You're making choices, all kinds of choices, note choices, rhythmic choices, that kind of thing. So yeah, to employ the ear, that in music is extremely important, and I might say one of the most important. And yes, the visual arts tend to be because of what they are very needless to say, to look at something is one thing, but to hear is another thing. It's two different things, and the visual thing is very commanding, without a doubt.
I wanted to ask you, when you first joined Mingus, could you talk a little bit about? I think what I've come to the realization is that organized crime, for better or for worse, the Mafia, the Italians, they love jazz. And they had a lot of the clubs. The reason there was a club every 5 feet in New York and Chicago, and it was because of organized crime. And the story that you told, and I need you to tell it today again. This idea, the first gig you're on, Dolphy was ready to leave the band, and Mingus finishes the set, and there's not enough money. And why don't you fill in the gaps from there?
Well, the club, I think they owed Mingus about a couple $1,000, and they didn't have it or didn't pay him for whatever reason. And it was kind of like the Sopranos. I mean, these guys might have been, everything you it was like looking at a movie.
A Tony Soprano, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
And it's very possible that they were all of that. And but anyway, Mingus upon hearing that the money wasn't available, he became enraged and actually started destroying this very nice, expensive piano.
But how did he destroy it specifically?
Well, he actually, Mingus was big. He weighed 300 pounds. He was probably 5'11" or something like that. And he was, at that time, I think he was early 40s. So he was strong and enraged, and he proceeded to go inside of the piano and pull the strings out.
That is so...
Yeah, which is incredible.
That's incredible.
That's a tremendous amount of pressure on piano strings. In fact, years ago, they used to show how strong piano strings were by lifting locomotives up with them. So anyway, he plucked them out, and I thought that this was going to be everybody. We'd all get killed.
Exactly.
With this, and then being the kind of club that this was, and instead, I think they were so awestruck that somebody would be that out of control, and that they actually just sort of looked at it happen and realized that this guy was maybe crazier than they were or something. It was like, boy, could turn. Anyway, for some kind of, that was kind of it, and he did what he thought was like a couple $1,000s worth of damage, and then he wanted to kill Eric Dolphy because Eric was going to quit the band. So he was very angry at Eric.
What I really like about the story is that after he dismantles this piano in such an unorthodox fashion, then he sits down at a table. They sit down in the bar, and they continue their socialization in the bar, in the club, and Dolphy's saying, listen, Charles, I'm leaving the band. He's like, no, I'm going to get a knife and I'm going to kill you.
Yeah, right. This is outside. I mean, but at this point now we're in the lobby of the club.
Yeah.
And
but you haven't left the club. That's astounding to me. I mean, I love that. It's not like you turned tail and ran. These guys the Mafia were like, holy cow, this guy's insane.
I should have done. I was so young. I was like 19 or 20 years old. So if I had any sense, I should have left right then.
Yeah, no,
me being some dumb, stupid kid, I'm just kind of watching, standing around with my mouth open, watching all this stuff that happened. And now Mingus is very mad with Eric and wants to kill him because Eric's going to quit the band. Now, of course, Mingus wasn't going to do any of that. He wasn't going to kill Eric. He loved Eric, but and he proceeded to say, "Well, get your knife out, and we're going to settle this." And Eric just smiled at him and said, "Mingus, I don't have a knife,
Right.
And Mingus said, "Well, wait here. I'm going to go across. I'll buy you one." He actually went across the street to a candy store, came back with a knife.
Let's be very clear.
Yeah, he actually did that. And of course, nothing happened.
No, but I mean, Mingus, he knew that. I think it was Dolphy and somebody else were ready to move on. He knew that.
It was Ted Curson.
Ted Curson. He knew that. Inevitably, he knew that. And Dolphy's spirit was so genuine and cerebral and kind.
Yeah.
But I just think, the word fearless is used sometimes in our vernacular now. I really believe the reason those Mafia guys looked at him and let him go was because Mingus didn't care if he died. He was fearless.
Well, he didn't.
He was fearless.
He didn't. Yeah, he didn't. See, that probably has something to do with it because even those guys who, we know what the reputation of that scene is. But if it's going to be like in other words, you'd have to kill this man some kind of way or really do. I mean, this would be it would call so much attention to the club and to everything. It's almost like let him go and get him out of here, and we'll deal with it later or some other kind of way or whatever. It's like it's not worth this hassle. That here's this and then see Mingus it wasn't like he was wrong. I mean, he was wrong.
And I think
doing it that way, but they probably did, or whatever. Who knows? But it dissipated, and that was the end of that. But there was always never a dull moment working with Mingus.
Well, and then on the flip side, I hang out with enough guys, Italian guys, to know that the bottom line is they owed him the money and they screwed up. So they weren't, on top of the fact that they were in awe of him, they also said, you know what, he has a right to be ticked off. They're pretty, again, we know what the reputation is, but the other classic story, and again, I want to preface this by saying that next week at this time, will be the second day of a 3-day music festival in Nogales, the Charles Mingus Hometown Music Festival. For a lot of people that don't know, Mingus spent the first 18 months of his life. He was born in Nogales, and we have a number of bands, and it's being run by, it's being coordinated by Yvonne Irvin, who used to be the head of the Tucson Jazz Society. And
I remember her, yeah.
She works for the University of Arizona now, and she's really pulling this off. And the other story that I really loved that you told about Mingus was this idea of being in British Columbia, up on stage, and unfortunately a bunch of big old white linebackers were barking a lot. You want to tell that story?
Well, we were in Canada, British Columbia, and Mingus insisted on, when he played, he when we played ballads and soft tunes, Mingus didn't like people to talk, at least where, they'd be too loud or disturbing other people. He hated that. So these guys were loud. They probably were half drunk and were talking, and Mingus just stopped in the middle of the tune, went to the bathroom, and came out with a toilet plunger and went over to the table. And I could see it. I'm still on the bandstand. I'm watching, all this body language happen. And Mingus threatening with a plunger. And then a couple of these guys, or one guy got up and took a swing at him. Really big. Everybody at this table these were big guys. And the guy missed Mingus, and Mingus kind of grabbed his arm and slung him, across the floor.
Right.
Mingus weighed 300 pounds, so he was dangerous, So,
but you said in the article, if the guy had connected Mingus...
if he had connected him, he would have broke it. He would have,
Yeah, but the point is...
Serious down. He just barely missed Mingus, but Mingus was fast enough to get out of the way of the punch, and then grabbed the guy's fist with the momentum that the guy already had, and just, he slung him across the floor, And then here yet is another situation where I'm thinking, well, this is going to end up in a real tragedy. It's going to be really, and instead it sort of dissipated, and that was the end of that. Well, the next morning when I looked at the local paper, it turns out that these guys were Canadian pro football players that happened to be in the club, and then and famous guys in Canada, and.
But it broke the tension, though. It broke the everybody laughed after that.
Well, after that, that evening, you couldn't get in the club because of all that publicity that had happened, and people were standing around the block to get in the club, because of just being written about in the paper, and people want to come and see this mad genius type, whatever. So, Mingus was very he sort of. A very talented man, without a doubt, but he did know some kind of way the drama was okay with him. He knew how to engage in that, and it always sort of turned out to be like a reason to bring a bunch of people down besides his great music.
He was an early guy who was one of those guys, and the names he kind of was like a Dennis Rodman kind of guy, where his talent was so good that he could put people in the seats, and then you never also knew what kind of showmanship what to expect. Was he going to go over to a table and bust people up, or was he going to, because they were talking?
Whatever was going to happen. Yeah. So he had that, and he people expected that from him, and it was there.
Just to put a button on it, in your mind, as we head into this festival, what do you think Charles Mingus meant to music?
Well, he certainly meant innovation. He also meant he was very passionate and very serious about what he was doing, and especially his composing. He believed in it. He was a real artist, and Mingus wrote poetry. He was a very thoughtful. He was a deep man. He had a lot of dimension, and he had a lot of depth, and he definitely pushed the envelope, and so he was a formidable character in many ways,
and he looked at you as almost a patron saint, because you were very. One night you guys got about $5, and you said, I want to donate it to the local poet. But I mean, he saw you as somebody who had chops, but he didn't. He had a different relationship with everybody in the band.
Yeah, but that's right. And we did it was a poet named Kenneth Patchen, a writer, and the 50s, and anyway, so he was not. I think he was ill or sick or needed help, and Mingus was a personal friend of this guy's, and so Mingus had the band and himself, do a benefit for the guy, and then money collected would go toward helping this guy with the hospital bills or whatever. And the money was really nothing for the band, Mingus started doling out $5 bills just for our time, and everybody else sort of took the money, and I just said, well, the $5 is not going to change my life. Just give it to him. It's ridiculous. Or what am I going to do with $5? Put it in the kitty for the man over there. Well, that's why we're doing this anyway. What's the point? And he thought that was. He looked up and thought that was. He was moved by that, and from that moment on, he always treated me a little differently. He was kind of the kind of guy that once he pigeonholed you in whatever box he thought you were in, then that was it. You were in that box, and nothing you did later would change that. And so he sort of had me in the box of nice guy, and
competent,
which was,
competent
fine,
musician, competent player.
Yeah. But nice guy. He thought I had
soul.
a nice soul.
Beautiful soul, and you do.
Yeah, he thought that something's different about this guy here.
I want to ask you a question about your first time in New York. My first guest on this journey over 13 months ago was Pat Martino.
Yeah.
And, I asked him a little bit about Pat. He had an unorthodox upbringing. He was bored with the high school curriculum, and he wandered up to Harlem and found a family up there he didn't know even existed. And two of those guys were Billy James and Don Patterson. And I know you collaborated with them right around the time you first cut your albums for Prestige, and I was hoping you'd talk about your relationship with those guys, because those guys were their how should I put this? Their ability to their proficiency and their longevity and their energy, they outlasted people. You guys were burners, and you guys had stamina. That's the word I'm looking for, was stamina. Can you talk a little bit about Sonny Stitt, yourself, Don Patterson, Billy James, that kind of crew?
Yeah, well, I remember doing a record with Sonny Stitt and also Billy James, the drummer, right? And then there was Don Patterson. Yeah, we did a record. We did a record together, and
it's called Funk You.
Yeah, and Don Patterson was Sonny Stitt's organist, and the drummer Billy James was the drummer with Sonny Stitt. So I was with Prestige, so was Sonny Stitt. So that's how that record date came about. And I was in awe of that because Sonny Stitt was one of my heroes. And so that was a fun record date. Pat Martino, I had done a record with him before with my record date. Him and also
Cedar Walton.
Yeah, Cedar Walton and Walter Booker and Billy Higgins and
Lenny McBrown.
No, it was Billy Higgins. This was Billy Higgins. This particular one I'm thinking about right now.
Wow.
And a guy named Nasir was a vibraphone player. And that's the first time I met Pat Martino and was involved. I think maybe I might have done or been involved with it, two records with him. And I was impressed with Pat Martino because he seemed to understand the language, and I liked his musical line and his ideas, and so that was a nice relationship.
Well, the cool thing is that I was going to ask you about your relationship with Pat, because Pat, because of his brain aneurysm, much of his memory from the time period that I crave so much is not there.
Yeah, I heard about that. He had to teach himself all over again.
Exactly, but also his memories of
everything.
And so I say to myself, boy, I do want to ask Charles about who Pat was at that time. The kind of, you guys collaborated a couple times in that from this moment on. And there was another one from the same period on Prestige.
Right.
And what, aside from when you say he understood the language?
Well, yeah, but I didn't know him that well. I mean, it's not like we were real close friends, because I had just met him and we were involved in a couple of record dates. And of course, I meet him in the studio, and we talk, and there's this camaraderie, and also the musical common denominators that we both had. His heroes were my heroes. We both had kind of similar ideas about how it should go musically, and so there was this meeting of the minds immediately between us, and this was before his, the whole brain problem, or his, before his problems, his health problems.
Mm-hmm.
So it was a totally different. But I must say I didn't know him that well, other than to know that he was a kindred spirit musically.
Beautifully put. I wanted.
Yeah.
Charles, we're going to have to do another hour.
Okay.
But in our remaining moments, I wanted to ask you.
Okay, wait a minute. Now let me get some straight. You are able to edit this, right?
Why would we want to edit it?
Well, or is there any? In terms of sequence or
Well, what I'm saying, we can edit this part right now. But,
yeah, okay.
But what I'm saying is, I love the flow. I'm just saying we have to go more in depth. But I want to, and we'll do that again in the near future. But
okay. So when you say another hour, you mean at another time?
Of course, you're a busy guy. So am I.
Okay.
Here's the reality.
Okay.
In the remaining moments, talk. He was one of these producers and A&R guys who kept jazz alive,
yes.
And he was pivotal. And the guy's name is Don Schlitten. And
Don Schlitten. Yes.
And I was hoping we have about 3 minutes before we go. Mm-hmm. Could you talk a little bit about what he meant to you and the kind of values that he was the type of guy that said, okay, this record may not make $1 million, but this is what we stand for.
Right. Yes, and that's very true. That's very well put, and it's true. Don Schlitten, and especially now, when I look back at it now, I realize even more now than I did back then when I was a lot younger, is that this person, Don Schlitten, was very, very valuable, not just to me, but to people like Barry Harris, other people that had a certain musical ideal that they engaged in, and that and Don Schlitten certainly promoted that, was sympathetic with what we were doing, and was very much into just trying to make good records. And he himself was a real jazz fan, mm-hmm. and he certainly he had his genre. Of the jazz that he liked. Mm-hmm. Maybe all of them do. Maybe all producers do have their favorites, but he certainly did. And he was willing to take his own money and energy and to try to promote and showcase and expose this music when it wasn't the thing making the money and getting a hell of a lot of attention, but it was his baby. He was willing to do it. He I must say, he along the way, he made some very good records. And
I want to say he had a very Norman Granz-ish kind of way of saying, we need to highlight the Charles McPhersons, the Jimmy Rannies, the Barry Harrises. Right. These are national treasures, and I'm willing to highlight them in the Xanadu collection, Sam Most, because these guys are, I want their legacy to live on, just the way Granz did with Pablo.
Yes, right.
So Charles, listen, I just want to tell you, that flowed really quick. That breezed by.
Okay, beautiful.
And let's plan to do something in the near future, and I'll get a link out this to you immediately.
Okay, all right. It's been I've had a lot of fun, and it's been very insightful. Thank you very much.
All right, Charles, be good.
All right, take care.
This is the Jake Feinberg Show on KWFM 1330. Stars.